Evening all, just wanted to highlight three selections and three races for Punchestown day 4 tomorrow. This always tends to be the best day, and I would say tomorrow's no exception. There's some very, very good races taking place. So, first is the 420. It's a 2.5 or 2 mile 5 Grade A novices handicap chase. And the horse I wanted to flag up is Balko Des Flos, who is currently 7 to 1. 8.2 on Betfair best price. At this stage, one you'd probably want to back with a bookmaker. Most of them are offering 1 to 4, quarter of the odds, 1, 2, 3, 4 in terms of each way places, which I think is a good bet. The key piece of form that drew me to him is his third behind Disco and Arduke at Leopardstown back on the 12th of February. I think that's a very strong piece of form, which has been franked from a pure form perspective. Arduke won the Irish Grand National very easily off 153, and Disco ran a good third in the JLT before winning easily here earlier in the week. Balko Des Flos off 143. I mean, there's no doubt he was actually slightly flattered by how close he got to those horses that day. From a sectional perspective, they went hard, particularly from the middle part of the race. And it was actually run on the same day as the Irish Gold Cup won by Size and John, and the sectional performances of Disco were significantly superior to Size and John on that occasion. And Balco de Flo was actually in the right place in terms of how the race was run, and he made good headway late on. He kept on very strongly, albeit when the race had been run. And he was flattered by that, but even so, you would still have to rate that performance in the high 140s, 150 or so. So, off a mark of 143 tomorrow, he would appear to me to be around half a stone well in if he were to reproduce that form. I don't see the ground being an issue, and yeah, strongly run race should suit as well. So I think he'll go very well at 7 to 1. Um, Hopefully he'll be none the worse for the fall at Cheltenham. He was running well, I thought. We won't know how he'd have got on in that race. I mean, I think it's safe to assume he would have probably been something like fourth or fifth, but even so, that would suggest 143 is a good mark. Yeah, 7 to 1, good bet. Next race I wanted to take a look at was the 5:30 at Punchestown, which is probably the best race of the entire week, the Champion Hurdle. There's no standout star performer here, but there's half a dozen horses at least who have run to kind of marks in the high 150s, early 160s. A lot of strength and depth here. Petit Mouchoir, third in the Champion Hurdle, ran a big race that day. Vroom Vroom Mag, perhaps a shade unlucky second in the Mayor's Hurdle. The choice of Ruby Walsh as well, interestingly. I was inclined to think he might go for Arctic Fire, who won the County Hurdle off a mark of 158. There would appear to be very little between those two, and I think they'll both run well. Again, my Tenter Years comes alive at this time of the season, and his second in the Champion Hurdle and the Aintree Hurdle are both excellent pieces of form, particularly when you take into account that the Aintree Hurdle was over a distance further than his best. And Brain Power flopped at Cheltenham, but prior to that would appear to have run to a mark in the mid 150s. And then going down, you also have horses like LeBake, who disgraced himself by failing to start on Tuesday. A reproduction of his Supreme Novice win would have him bang there. And Gordon Elliott does appear to be very confident that he'll start off in one shape or form, so it'll be interesting to see the tactics there. I wonder if they might lead him in and go from the front. It's interesting. It's an interesting one. And even horses like Wicklow Brave ran a good eighth in the Champion Hurdle. Ivan Grozny, suited by the ground conditions, and horses like Tombstone and Identity Thief, who at their best would play a part here. Although seem to have lost their way a little bit. But the horse I wanted to draw your attention to, and I'm most interested in at the prices, is a horse called Diakali, who would appear to be the third string of the Mullins, I was going to say quartet, but it's actually a quintet. There's 5 Mullins horses here. The performance that's drawn my eye to him was his 20-length victory over Stars Over the Sea last time out. He's been off for nearly 2 years prior to that, and he came back with what you would call a satisfactory reappearance, where he clearly needed the run at Leopardstown in early March. But that performance in Fairyhouse about 10 days ago was a serious performance from a time perspective. He led basically the whole way in what was a strongly run race. The other two other good races run that day: Project Blue Book over 2 miles and Renetti over 2.5 miles. Diakali's race was much stronger run than either of those. I think between the first and 3 out, it was 10 seconds quicker than Renetti in that period, and 7 or 8 seconds quicker than Project Blue Book. And they didn't make much inroads into that time gap, in the last, from the third last to the line either. I think they made up perhaps a second or two on Diakali, but Diakali was carrying 11:12 that day compared to 11:3 Renetti was carrying, and 11:0 that Project Blue Book was carrying. Of course, Renetti's an early 150s horse, and Project Blue Book's probably around a 140 juvenile. So these are two good horses, and for Diakali to put in such a blistering relative time figure would suggest to me that he's up there with the very best of these. He's a strong traveller. Even though they went a strong pace that day, he was quite keen through the race, which has always got to be a bit of a concern. But it gives me encouragement because, and this is a negative, there is going to be plenty of pace on here, and you can guarantee Petit Mouchoir will go from the front. Might enter yours is likely to be handy, and horses like Vroom Vroom Mag, Ivan Grozny, and even perhaps Lebec won't be too far from the front on this occasion. So I think you can guarantee there's a strong pace, which is perhaps not to his liking, because although the race was strongly run at Fairyhouse 10 days ago, he did get something of an easy time of it up front. He was never harried in the lead. But the fact he was keen that day, perhaps a stronger pace here will help him settle a bit. And also, I mean, he is clearly able to go that gallop. So I wouldn't be too put off by that. And it's possible that he was flattered that day and he's just not on that level. But in terms of a speed rating for that performance at Fairyhouse, I mean, you would have to have rated that 160 plus, and it would have been as good as any individual piece of form that any of these horses in this race have achieved this year on the clock. So I'm more than happy to back him. He's currently 16. A little bit of support on Betfair. I think you can get 14 to 1 each way, although not the most generous of place terms. But yeah, I think he's interesting, and he's 8 years old, getting to the kind of stage where you'd hope he'd be hitting his peak. The run 10 days ago is a slight concern. That might have taken too much out of him. He might not reproduce that, but at the prices you can afford to take that risk, and who knows, you may be rewarded. So the best bet of the day for me, though, comes in the 6:05 2.5 mile Champion Novices Hurdle. Another good race. I think the obvious three to concentrate on are the front three in the market: Finian's Oscar, Death Duty, and Let's Dance. The others, Blueberry, Bacardi's, Kemboy, even Run for Dave, the Nipper, and Milan Avant, they've all put in decent performances. But none of them have really cracked that elusive 140 kind of level. And Finian's Oscar, Death Duty, and Let's Dance at their best have all put in performances upwards of £10 better than that. I think Finian's Oscar is the deserved favourite. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I was sceptical about him prior to his win at Aintree. He hadn't done it on the clock prior to that. He'd never put up a performance better than 140. But fair play to him at Aintree, despite doing a little bit wrong. There was a couple of slightly sketchy jumps, but he was also quite green and a touch out pace at times through the race. But I have to say, turning for home, I thought he had no chance. I'd backed Mizir de Zobo that day and was counting my cash turning for home because of how well he was going. But Finian's Oscar proved why the Tizzards have always held him in high regard, really found for pressure, and ended up winning quite well at the line. That was a good time performance, far and away the best he's achieved. I rated it around 150, perhaps 151, 152, which is in line with his official rating of 150. I think that's about how good he is at this stage. He may be even better in time, who knows? But he's a deserved favourite, but just too short for me at the prices. I think he'll run well, and I think there's every chance he runs even better than he did at Aintree. But you can take a risk on another Finian's Oscar as short as 7-4. Again, Lance ran well at Fairyhouse. That was a decent time race. I rated it about 140. At her best, she is 145 horse, and given that she's receiving £7 from most of the others, that would put her bang there if she were to replicate even a 140 run. Again, though, she ran 10, 11 days ago. Perhaps this is coming a touch too soon. It's certainly not Mullins' modus operandi, usual modus operandi, to run horses again so quickly. But of course, the title race is got to be under consideration. And again, yeah, I think she'll run well. But the horse I'm most interested in, and in fact I think is by some margin the best bet of the day is Death Duty. Currently 9-2 available. I think you can get similar kind of 5.4 on Betfair. I thought the decision to run him in the Albert Bartlett was, I mean, obviously in hindsight, a poor one. I can understand why they did it because he's actually, he's not necessarily a keen horse. He just does things quite easily, very low head carriage through the race, and you'd think he was the type to settle and get the trip. I don't think he quite got the trip that day. Um, Although I know Gordon Elliott perhaps thinks differently. But nonetheless, it was still actually a pretty good performance in the Albert Bartlett that day. I mean, I've rhapsodied a lot about the strength of that form from a time perspective. I thought it was the best novices race and one of the best hurdle races at Cheltenham. Death Duty was held in fifth when he officially unseated Ryder, but he all but fell at the last. But even so, up to that point, you would have to say he was down to run to a mark of 145 to 150. Prior to Cheltenham, I'd had him running to about 150. So it's possible that's just as good as he is. But I know Gordon Elliott holds him in even higher regard than that, and there's been a couple of possible excuses mooted for him. One that he was quite dehydrated that day because of the inability to hydrate horses prior to the race, and also the fact that he may be a better horse over 2.5 miles. Certainly, the sectionals leading into Cheltenham had suggested to me that he might not quite be the stayer that they thought he was, but instead actually quite a speedy horse. And I think, yeah, I think he probably is a better horse than that bare result. But even if he's not, coming back down to 20 furlongs here to 2.5 miles, I think this is probably ideal conditions for him at this stage. He's been working well at home, vibes are good, and again, based on his form prior to Cheltenham, he would look to have run to marks similar to that of Finian's Oscar and Lit Chance. So I think you can take one more chance on Death Duty to live up to the hype and the promise that's been the people like Gordon Elliott have viewed him with, and I would be disappointed if he didn't go very close tomorrow. I think he's got close to a favourites chance here, and I think 9-2 or around 5.4 on Betfair is a very good bet. I think he'll go well. Thanks, guys, and I'll put up another video tomorrow night for Punchestown Day 5.